Hello, welcome to our viewers. Thank you for joining us today on our webinar, Media Workflows in the Work From Home Era, a real-world demonstration. Joining us today are the same speakers as last time, Doug Soltesz, Director of Product Solutions at SME, as well as David Phillips, Principal Architect of Media and Entertainment Solutions at Cloudian. Welcome, David. Welcome, Doug. Before we begin, I just want to point out that those of you who have just joined, we're taking questions at the end of the webinar. So if you do have any questions, click the tab at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer them once we finish our demonstration. All right, so last time we were together, we talked about the legacy workflow of media and entertainment, involving a lot of FedEx or file transfers from the acquisition to a central data center, and then obviously taking those assets, trying to figure out how you transfer them, whether that be, again, through FedEx, tape delivery out to distribution. And then again, once all that assets are in that central data center, how do you actually interact with that from your end users, both in your office as well as now in this work from home time in a remote solution? That's where last time Doug and Dave talked about the next generation workflow, leveraging technologies like Claudian at the core to store all the data in a highly scalable, highly reliable, and durable object storage platform. On top of that, the Storage Made Easy platform allowing you and your users to easily go and fix those gaps in the acquisition, the distribution, as well as the workflow, using the simple web-based interface that Storage Made Easy provides, the file acceleration through our MStream technology, as well as desktop and mobile tools where they make sense in the environment. So that's what we talked about last time from a next generation workflow perspective, obviously just from a slide presentation. But today we're going to jump deeper in and really show what this looks like in practice. So Doug, Dave, if you guys can start to show some of this, we can step through and really show and understand this next generation workflow using Storage Made Easy and Cloudian.
Sure, Eric. So I think we can start off by just saying, hey, I think everybody can see the difference between this and our previous Bright Talk or other webinars out there is that we're not using a slide deck this time. You've got us. You've got the. It looks like a slide, but now we're live streaming, right? We've got software like OBS, and we are doing a lot of this through the exact mechanisms we talked about last time. So the first thing I want to bring up is that the workflow is still the same. You need to acquire information, or not information. You need to acquire assets. You need to store them somewhere. That can be in the cloud, it can be on Cloudian, it can be on other storage on premise. And then workers, when they're working from home, need to be able to work on that. They need to be able to collaborate on that. And then of course we need to distribute that. And so those were really the highlights from the last webinar. And that's what we want to show you today, but in a whole different flow, the actual real world. And so David, you've already started working on a video. Why don't you talk about what they're going to be seeing today, and then we'll just dump right into the demo.
Right. So, the concept, that for our example workflow, comes from something like, a news magazine program where you have lots of different, kind of remote shooters from, remote locations, could be from around the world, different countries, different continents, who are out there, kind of gathering footage, not necessarily breaking news, but, a lot of kind of the news magazine style programs, you just need some kind of essentially background B-roll footage, of different locations, be it Asia, different parts of North America, Europe, Latin America. So for these, but you still need to kind of you have a fast-paced production, you identify remote production teams, you give them a kind of mandate of like, this is the kind of footage that we're looking for. And then, you need to provide some sort of access, some sort of way for it to get the footage back, not ship it in a drive, not like write it off to a data tape, and put it in a courier service, but some is like, how can people contribute, this remote footage, to this content creation team? And that's where, the combination of Storage Made Easy with a Cloudian object storage platform provides content creators a really like a media production hub, right? So it's both can scale to multi-petabyte level. So unlike, a lot of cloud service options like Dropbox, Box, Google Drive that are really made for kind of small, project-based data sets, you can combine Storage Made Easy platform with a Cloudian storage cluster and store all of your media library, both your historical legacy from previous shoots or from stock footage libraries, stock music, graphics libraries that might span like years if not decades. And really kind of, once you put it all together, really kind of adds up to a petabyte, multi-petabyte level media library. But so enable these remote workers to access both that that kind of rich deep media library, but also as a media production hub for ingesting and acquiring this new footage.
Yeah, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the key aspects of that from the acquisition standpoint is you want it to be both user friendly as well as expedient in delivering those assets back and forth, right? So it's finding that right technology that fits that gap so that the people out in the field can feel like they're easy, just drop folders or files into an interface, and then behind the scenes, all the leverage technology to really speed that up so they're not waiting forever for those assets to be delivered.
Right, and of course, most importantly, making sure that this is actually a secure system Absolutely. For delivery, secure system for storage, because a lot of the kind of file sharing services, you end up having to kind of extend accounts or share passwords between teams, and quickly becomes essentially you start to compromise your security procedures, security protocols. So the great thing about Storage Made Easy is that you can have your distributed now your work at home teams inside the organization who typically have Active Directory accounts and have that kind of traditional access and role-based access control, can all kind of maintain all that kind of users and group permissions. And then third parties you can extend temporary kind of third party access for these kind of contract workers and kind of remote consultants.
So David, why don't we switch to your environment, and you can walk us through, what's already set up and what our next step is.
Sure.
All right, David. So what are we seeing? It looks like a photo gallery inside the enterprise file fabric.
Yeah. So this is a view of the environment that we're using for this demonstration. So on the left-hand side here, I've got my Claudian, what's labeled the Claudian Media Hub. So this would be the kind of central data center, rich media library, which again could be scaled up to the multi-petabyte level without in a very kind of cost-effective and easily scalable way. That might hold all of my sound effects library, stock footage library, stock photos. In this example, I've got a stock photo folder full of kind of archival photos of New York City, and which I can kind of do a browse and search across. I can kind of get a thumbnail browse, or if I'm looking for something specific, I can use search terms. And then I've also got essentially a shared files, a Cloudian bucket that is essentially incorporated with Storage Made Easy as here's my shared files, here's my kind of location for users to trade and collaborate and kind of all be able to kind of access the same group of files no matter where they are, if they're in the office or if they're anywhere that they can access the internet with a web browser. So this is the kind of capability that having essentially where I can look at and browse and search my storage from anywhere, and also I can kind of quickly upload and download. If I'm working at home, and I want to kind of pull files, from a stock footage library, I can download those, and Storage Made Easy using the MStream technology is going to accelerate that to try to get the best out of my internet bandwidth. So here you can see, and go ahead.
No, I was saying exactly. And so then what are we looking at here? So you've already started the project we'll be working on today?
Right. So this is an example here. I've got some footage from that a contributor in Seoul, Korea, time-lapse footage of a sunset from Seoul, Korea. I've got some other footage that someone shot in Manila, Philippines, and then I've got some footage from Minneapolis, St. Paul here. So I've got, and I've also, working with another graphics artist who is uploaded all of these lower thirds graphics. So this is kind of the in a nutshell, very kind of short project, distributed team, but I could have a sound designer, a music composer who is contributing the audio tracks, graphics designer doing motion graphics and lower thirds, and then remote shooters who are contributing this kind of atmospheric B-roll footage from around the world. So I've got a gap here at the beginning. I've got a lower third.
Yeah, I had some clips to contribute to you. Now, obviously you could give me a AD LDAP SAML account into your system there, but since I'm not somebody that normally works with you, why don't you just create if you go back, a shared link or a folder somewhere, shoot that over to me, and I will share the clips that you wanted. I had some B-roll, and I broke 3 sections out that I think were probably the best.
Okay.
Right. So in this use case, we can imagine that Doug is, a contractor or somebody else in the field, a freelance photographer that is doing this work. And again, we don't want to give him necessarily control to get into the Cloudian storage, to that asset library, but instead leverage Storage Made Easy to create these shared links that then allow Doug, as the freelancer, to upload just the videos that are required. And we can watch that flow go now. So yeah.
Yep.
And create that
and this may land directly on this Cloudian storage, which is pretty neat. With other solutions out there, if you upload data to a Google Drive account or something, you don't get to pick the storage. So David, it looks like in this case you've got a bucket. You've picked your bucket. You're creating a folder. I guess in S3 terms you call it a prefix, and you're controlling where the flow of the data will go. And SME is in control of the acceleration, the security. So yeah, now if you just up above, if you click on the folder above it, and yep, there you go, switch view, perfect. And then share by URL. Yeah, not team share. So do that again, click share and share by URL. There you go. And then so now what we're seeing are some of the options. Now I need to put the data in there right away. So if you want to set an expiration on this for an hour from now, feel free, and that way you're sure that nobody else will use this link. And then if you put in a simple password and send that over to me in our chat bar, I will upload you the files you'd requested. All right, David, so I got that link from you in the chat bar, and I am going to go ahead and paste this in Chrome. I could use any browser I wanted. And you said that we had used our standard password, so I'm going to enter that in from my password manager. And I am not going to save that password. So it looks like you created a folder for me called Doug. It's all empty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the folder with the files I wanted, and I can actually just click and drag this entire folder or all the files. But one thing I did want to demonstrate is our MStream technology. The MStream technology at Storage Made Easy accelerates all file transfers, and that can be uploads or downloads. It can be via the browser. It can be between 2 different storage media. So those could be 2 types of on-premise storage, like a Cloudian and a StorNext. It can be between a cloud storage platform like Google or Amazon or Microsoft's clouds and something like your Claudian on-premise. Really, any way we go, if the API supports some sort of acceleration, we do it. When we're talking about the browser, there's two different ways that we can accelerate data. One is to move smaller files in parallel. So you can see that most of the files I split out for you, they're all around 10 megabytes. But the actual B-roll that has all of the raw stock footage is a gig. So if I just dump this entire thing in the folder, what would happen is the B-roll will be broken into multiple simultaneous pieces. The other ones will be moved probably one at a time. The browser I'm using, Chrome, can only handle 4 simultaneous uploads at a time for our MStream technology. So what I do is, just to demonstrate that, first I move the 4 small ones, so you can see those going in parallel. So what you're seeing here is them being uploaded in parallel, and let me make the screen a little bit smaller because you've got the bandwidth over there on the right. And so you can see that it copied all 4 of those in parallel. And then likewise, if I had also dragged in this file, or now if I drag it individually, MStream, because this is a larger file, so 1 gigabyte file, MStream may say, well, that's a bigger file. Instead of moving it or other files in parallel, I'm going to use some of my threads to break this into pieces. So because we're not moving any other files, and I know my browser can do 4 simultaneous streams, when I bring this in, we're going to see 4 simultaneous streams of data. And the way we're going to see that, well, actually, we've got a nice little overlay right there. Let me just break that out for you so it's a little cleaner. So we have the speed, we have how many total parts it's sending right now. So it's going to break this into 8 parts total. Right now it's sending 4 of those parts. And the bandwidth is honestly going to be dependent on your, the speed in which I can send. I'm sending from a lab right now. I think maybe I have a 100 megabit capability, and I don't know where your Claudian's located. But what MStream's doing is it's just handling all the complexity. It's breaking it into the streams, just like it did when I moved the smaller files. It's doing the same kind of thing for the bigger file. But we don't need to wait for this to be done to now go ahead and start working on the files I thought were more important for you to go ahead and include, as long as you trust my judgment that these are the better files to use for the lower thirds.
Yeah, and actually, before we move on, Doug, just a quick question on this. So, is there a special add-on or plugin required, or Flash or Java or anything like that required for this to work?
So no, when you're using the browser for uploads, we can do 4 simultaneous streams without a plugin. When we're talking about downloads, you do need a plugin. So we have a small plugin called Cloud Edit. What Cloud Edit does is not only could it handle the acceleration for a download, but say I was working on a Word file or an Excel file or one of these movie files, I'm able to double click it, work on it, and then save it back. Now, when you work on a raw file, you're not going to actually edit the original, but you can imagine if you're working on a Word document or a PowerPoint and you double click it, if you're using some other system like Dropbox, what it's saying do is it's saying copy it down, saying save to your local system, you're going to work on it, and then it's up to you to save it back up instead of just hitting the save button. Alternatively, what you're going to see David using is we have a technology called Drive. We have Drive for Mac, Windows, and Linux. And with Drive, if you install that application in Windows, it mounts your SME storage as a drive letter. And so you'll see all of your data, all of your shares, as like a T drive or an S drive or whatever drive letter or letters you want it to correspond to. In Mac or Windows, that's going to be, Mac or Linux, that's going to be a mount point instead.
Yeah, and key to that again is, if we think about this workflow as acquisition, where you're not creating AD accounts for users and you're giving these links out to people, you don't have to worry about what browser they're using, if they've downloaded the right plugins, right? It'll just work on anything. So
it'll just work, and for the most part, for most people working from home, 4 simultaneous streams is going to be enough. But when you actually use the SME tools or the agents, you can exceed those 4 simultaneous streams. But it depends on where you're working from. If you're working from the office and you actually were working with another office, then maybe you do want 8 simultaneous streams of data because maybe they have a gig pipe.
Right. Makes sense. Thanks.
All right, David, so why don't you switch back, take control, and guide us through the next step of the process.
All right, can everybody see my screen here?
Yes.
Yeah, so it looks like you've got those files. Now that you hit refresh, you've got my B-roll, plus you've got a number of the smaller proxies that I thought would be useful in including.
Yeah. So, and you know, I think the key thing here is like, okay, you know, I think everybody kind of understands it's like storage made easy, gives me a web interface for looking and browsing and searching for media, and for also transferring, uploading, and downloading media. But how do I actually get it into my out into my project? And that's where, you know, the Storage Made Easy has a kind of technology called Cloud Drive, which is essentially allows me to mount my collection of storage made easy storage pools, my Claudian, my NAS, my, you know, my SAN could be different storage volumes, you know, and collects all those, and I can mount all that as a drive letter on my Windows system here. So if I go into the Doug folder, I see I can essentially, this is the file that I'm going to use for the opening of the piece, this New York City video. I'm going to import that, and because this cloud drive is essentially cached that you know, that storage made easy, you know, file locally on my local SSD, I can, you know, this is an HD file, but I can scrub through it and play it in real time. So this is the file that I want to incorporate into my project. Just going to trim the heads and tails down here a little bit and drop it in. Undo that. And now, once again, if I go and I say reveal where this file is, reveal and explore, even though this is, you know, on my Claudian Median Hub, this is my shared files folder, I'm able to, you know, play it back in real time, play it back in HD file because it's cached it locally.
Right, that Claudian could be essentially anywhere in the world. You know, I just simply got your link, I dragged it, I clicked it. You know, that could be, I'm in California, that Claudian could be in New York, it could be in London, it could be absolutely anywhere, and you could be anywhere as well. And, you know, that's one of the points of this webinar. I think somebody in the last webinar said, you know, we'd run a little long, questions were out there, but somebody said, hey, you know, isn't object storage like Claudian not super performant? You know, I guess they're used to using an SSD or a NAS that's based on SSDs, and that can be really expensive. But I think you really highlighted it there in that, you know, the Claudian is your pool. It's all your storage. It's all the photos. But using the SMA drive, you know, that's being cached to a SSG drive that you have attached to your laptop. So you are getting the performance, but you're not paying the big dollars, right?
Right. And the other benefit is that, you know, you don't have this issue where people are copying they're like copying files locally. I have my local copies of files, and then I upload like a new copy of files, and you have all this kind of data and copy management issues. Whereas like I'm really just, you know, there's a central, you know, master version of the file, and I'm just caching a copy locally, and then I can use that to essentially do the next step, which is, now that I've got my completed project here, I've got all of my graphics, my video, my audio, I want to now output it for, I'm going to create essentially an MPEG-4 to send around to the, you know, broader team for review and approval. So at this point, I want to output my timeline here. All right, so now that I finished exporting my timeline from Premiere, I can go double check. I can see that I see it in Cloud Drive and the final output folder. Premiere's finished writing the file there. So I verify that. So now if I go into the Storage Made Easy web interface, I can double check, make sure that I see in my final output folder that Cloud Drive has finished uploading this MPEG-4. I can even pull up the video player do a quick video preview of it, scrub through the video, make sure I've got picture, I've got sound, everything looks good. Excellent. So now I'm ready to share it out. Select the file, click the share button, and I'm going to set a password on it. At this point, I can create a new link, copy that to my clipboard. I can paste that into a text app, messaging app. I can paste it into
Slack
an email.
it, email it, however
Yeah.
you like.
I can basically, anybody that I pass the link and who has the password can access the video.
Right, and if people watched our part 1, they know that we also have an audit log, and that every time that's accessed now, we're going to know who touched it, their IP address. In fact, we have even more complex auditing if you want, where you have to give out a reason for sharing and who you're sharing with. But right now you have basic sharing on, which allows you to password protected, which is, to be honest, all most people want, because everything we're doing right now is via HTTPS. It's all TLS 1.2 and AES 256 encrypted.
Great.
Hey, one last thing that I'd like to bring up is the producer, sometimes when they download it, they want to make sure that the MD5 sum is the same, or they might want some media info on it. So one of the features that we have in Storage Made Easy, you don't need to transcode this because it's already in a web format, but if you right-click that file right now, you should be able to do something called content extraction. And so if you perform content intelligence, and what content intelligence is go ahead and click it. It's and so what content intelligence is it's our ability to mine the file or the media asset for more information. In this case, in your lab, we have the setup to pull out the MD5 sum and to pull out the media info. We'll put them into our own database as information, but we'll also put them as sidecar files. And the benefit of having them as sidecar files is that then you could share those also as files. So if somebody downloaded that file, they'd know what the MD5 sum is. They'd be able to see the media information for it, because maybe they didn't know it was an H.264 instead of an H.265. And so right there, if you click that, you got it there, your 2 sidecars. And those are going to be on your storage. Obviously, Claudian has the ability to save metadata, but a lot of systems, like whether that's your NAS filer, your file system mount, or Dropbox, don't have the capability of adding metadata in. And so we save them as sidecars so that they're just universally usable. We have deeper ties into things like Google's Cloud. So if you actually want to send that out to Google's Cloud and get their their intelligence on it, it'd be able to pick out tags, it'd be able to pick out scenes. If that was somebody talking, it'd be able to do a text-to-speech or subtitle transcoding. So there's a number of features that we have there, but the one that you've got set on your system right there is probably the most popular, other than our new transcoding. Transcoding is really only going to be applicable when you're not dealing with something like an H.264 type of file.
Right, dealing with kind of large, potentially 4K files, different camera formats, or high-res mezzanine formats.
So Eric, at this point, I hope Dave and I have walked you through what we talked about in the last webinar. I'm guessing that we have questions from the panel that you can go check out, but in the meantime, do you have any questions for us, or do you want to just go check the panel?
No, I just want to say thank you guys. That was a great presentation. It was good to see, in practice, that workflow that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, both from the asset side, how do you deliver those assets in a easy manner, in a quick manner from the field now into your central media hub, as Dave called it, right? And then now that those assets are in there, right, how do you easily go and interact with that in your native tools? And we saw David work in his Adobe Premiere, using the cloud drive just like he would in the office, right? So no need to retrain the people. And then finally, now that the clip is all edited, send it off to me as the producer for me to review, and we can see that full life cycle using Storage Made Easy and using Claudian. So that's great, thanks. But yes, we do have questions, and for anybody that came in late, if you do have any questions, there's a tab at the bottom where you can ask a question. And if we just jump over to the questions screen now, we can then go into those questions.
Perfect, perfect. Why don't we switch to just the regular camera view and answer these? Yep, excellent. All right.
All right. So as mentioned, we have definitely a bunch of comments or questions, I should say. So let's start with here. So I think this is for David, Claudian. So the question is, realistically, how much data can be stored on a Claudian installation? And I think you're on mute, David.
Yeah, when you switched your feed, you might have muted yourself, Dave.
All right, we'll come back. So the next question is for Doug. It
Okay.
says, will File Fabric work well with a quantity of data that a media business needs? So why don't you talk a little bit about the, footprint, I guess probably much the same as what we're going to come back to Cloudian side, but from SME side, how do we deal with that?
Sure. So, we work with media customers, we work with law firms, we work with, healthcare. We have different instances that have, ingested a petabyte worth of data, a billion plus files. One of the things that you have to remember is that we're literally just the metadata in front. So we're not actually, one thing that we didn't highlight in this video, but we did highlight last time we talked, was that we never alter your data. So when a file comes into us and we deliver it on Claudian, we didn't proprietize that file. You can go directly to Claudian, you can pull that file back out. And so because we don't proprietize any data, it means that we don't have these giant metadata libraries of different fragments and pieces and things like that. So realistically, we're probably talking about 1K a file that we're keeping of metadata per file. Now, of course, you saw at the end there that we could do advanced content extraction for certain types of files like media files and whatnot. And so, that MD5 sum is obviously less than a K, but that media info was maybe 4K more of data. And that's why we keep some of it in our database, but for the most part, we load it as a sidecar file. So yeah, the only spot where I think I'd be a little worried is if you had an animator. Sometimes they have really small files and 10 billion of them or something like that. But we'd certainly be good for any of the end clips and whatnot. But storing every single individual model may or may not be the best one.
Yeah, definitely important to look at the workload and the use case. But I think at a high level, we've got customers running with terabyte plus size files on the system.
Oh yeah.
Billions of files and objects. So it works quite well at scale. So David, I think we got your audio now. So back to you.
Yeah.
Again, the question was, realistically, how much data can be stored on a Cloudian installation?
Yeah, I mean, we like to categorize Cloudian as infinitely scalable, just because there's no inherent limits, because it is a distributed system where you can just keep adding nodes and increasing the capacity, increasing the availability, and even the performance of the whole storage cluster. We have customers who have hundreds of petabytes of media assets or genomics data, things like that. And that it can be comprised of essentially billions of objects. We support essentially, the round number of billion objects, like per bucket, right? So in real world terms, we don't really consider ourselves having storage limits. It's really just about how much rack space you have in your data center, things like that. Or we have customers who have multiple data centers because we support the same web scale architecture designs, where I can have a rack, in multiple racks in a data center, and then multiple data centers in a region, and it's all essentially in one single storage domain.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so the next one we got is back to Doug. Does the File Fabric know that it's dealing with media assets, or is it just a bunch of files to the software?
So for the most part, I would say 95% of the operations consider it just to be a bunch of files, right? We can take in any file. It could be an ISO, right? So maybe you've got your Red Hat installation ISO, and you want to right-click it and you want to say, hey, give me the MD5 sum of this. You can. Obviously, you're not going to be able to transcode it, and you're not going to be able to send it up to Google and those libraries. So we do have a certain number of features in the content intelligence that specifically look for a type of file, like an MOV. You can't do a media extraction on something like that. The gallery view specifically looks for a number of types of image files, whether they're RAW or they're Sony format or whatnot. When David first jumped in the environment, he had the full preview. That preview is adjustable and whatnot. But and then lastly, I talked a little bit about Cloud Edit. And Cloud Edit by default would allow you to pull down a media file quickly. And again, it's probably not something you're going to then try to edit, because that's just not what you do with a master copy. You'd use our drive. But if you had, say, a Photoshop file that you actually were looking to edit, you need to go into Cloud Edit and say, hey, I would like to alter this type of file. But for the most part, we can deal with any type of file. We can move them around. You can use the system for both your home drives and your Word, Excel. You can put scripts in it. You can do workflows. You can collaborate, and you can manage your entire media practice remotely.
Excellent. Cool. All right, let's go bounce back and forth. So the next one, back to David. What makes Claudian storage better than just going out and using a public cloud storage service?
Right, and it's kind of a common question, and it really comes down to your specific organization's workflow needs and other considerations, like how much data center space do you have? Do you even have a data center? So it really is geared towards the essentially customer profile, where they have on-prem tier 1 storage. They need essentially some sort of secondary storage target, an expandable, scalable pool of secondary storage that can provide a complement for kind of backup and archive from that tier 1 storage, but also just can act as we're kind of went through in this webinar, a central media storage hub that can be accessible. It's scalable on-prem, but it's also accessible anywhere via the S3 API and things like the SME interface. So, it really comes down to, there is cost benefits for a large media library that is stored for a long term, if these are valuable assets that are being stored for, not just, 3 years and 5 years, but, 10 years and even 50 years. We have customers, in news and sports and entertainment who have their own large legacy archives in the multi-petabyte level of scale. Storing that in the public cloud over those long periods of time is not cost effective. We have a tremendous cost advantage over that. So it really, there are advantages to public cloud services or storage services like Dropbox, in that they are for small data sets, they're easy to start up with, and they're easy to, they're relatively inexpensive. Where Claudian comes in is when you get to those kind of larger scales, where, like not just hundreds of petabytes, let's say greater than 100 petabytes up into the, hundreds of terabytes up into the petabytes of flow.
One thing I'll throw in, just because, I know this came up on a POC that I worked on with David not too long ago, is, a lot of people in the media business are intolerant to any type of failure, if they're doing some sort of live broadcasting and whatnot. So, if you're a smaller shop and you're doing feature length films and all that, that's different. But what they brought up was, uptime failure. And so when you have a Claudian, it has high availability. So does the public cloud, don't get me wrong. But, there are a number of things that can go wrong between your office location and that public cloud, whether that's your internet link, them, denial of service attacks, things like that, how much, bandwidth, extra latency. And so, they're going to use this as a tiering strategy. One thing we didn't bring up in the video is that, Claudian can also tier to different clouds. So you can use, public clouds as a cache. But, if you have everything on premise, you kind of have in some ways the ability for higher availability. You take some risk out.
Yeah, and I think another key aspect to what you're saying, Doug, is that, again, because it's on-prem in your data center and it's on your 10 gig, 25 gig, 100 gig network, you have essentially this unlimited, whatever, all of your available bandwidth on your local network, that you're not being charged for the egress fees, you're not being charged for the bandwidth costs. So, to come back around to the question, why use Cloudian over a public cloud service? Number one, cost can be a factor, performance can be a factor, and then because it's on-prem behind your firewall, you have complete control over the security profile.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, guys. All right, next question. Actually, this is a quick one. I can tackle it. Is there anything like Cloud Drive for our Linux machines? So yes, the file fabric from the desktop tool side supports Mac, Windows, and Linux. On the Linux side, we're just using basically a fuse mount to create a mounted location that talks to the APIs to access that data. The other tools that we have available as well are also mobile. So iOS and Android apps are available. Not to say that you would have people doing editing of those assets on their mobile devices, but in the scenario we talked about, where, for example, I'm a producer and I get the link to view that raw footage or the dailies or whatnot, potentially I could view that right from my phone. Click the link, it will download, it'll be able to play back in my native video viewers on my local device. So, depending on where your users are, we have tools that can meet you there.
Can I throw in one thing there? So generally, when I work with healthcare or media entertainment, and they're talking about Linux, I haven't seen a ton of people with Linux desktop. So to your point, we absolutely have the tool they can use and everything like that. Linux often comes up when they're talking about, say, transcoding or they're doing genomics or something like that. And so if you're transcoding, you have a Linux machine that's running Vantage, it's running FFmpeg, it's running Amberfin, whatever it's running. You can, as we show, have a cache. You can use our software to pull it directly from Cloudian, transcode it on that, and then send it back. Alternatively, what we've seen in a number of shops is they already have some type of shared NAS storage. And so what those machines are doing is they're just looking for a certain folder. Once something's dropped in that folder, they automatically execute it, or it's dropped with a sidecar file that's the execution. And so in that case, the way that you would use our software is maybe not to install that on those Linux systems, but to keep your current workflow and to use our software to move data from Cloudian to that NAS, and then when it's done, to move it back. So there's two different ways to tackle that. Obviously, we don't know what somebody was thinking of when they posed that question, but there's two different angles that, depending on if we're talking server or user use case.
Yeah, thanks. All right, so David, so it seems like object storage platforms are all the same. What's so special about Cloudian?
Yeah, I think, sure. I think one of the key differentiators for our platform is that, number one, it's a software-defined storage platform. That means that you can deploy it on a variety of different hardware storage servers. We sell appliances that's a bundle of hardware and software, but we also are certified with HP, Lenovo, Cisco. We have customers running on Supermicro. So that flexibility, and that you're not locked into a specific hardware vendor. You can use whatever commodity storage hardware you want and meets your requirements, be it our appliances or sourced by yourself. So that flexibility, the flexibility of being able to scale from very small, we can start from as small as 3 nodes and then scale to like hundreds of nodes and all the kind of multi-petabyte ranges that we have been talking about. I think the other key differentiator is our native S3 API implementation, and that really especially comes in sophisticated workflows that you find in M&E, where I want to do I've got like a long multi-hour recording, a large object, multiple tens of gigabytes. I just want to clip 15 seconds of it. So we work with lots of different MAM vendors that can use the native S3 API calls of doing a byte range read request, to be able to clip a small piece of a large object, which that kind of advanced, native S3 API functionality is, what we find is, really differentiates us in the market. We have a high degree of interoperability, with other different software vendors in the media space.
Excellent, thanks. All right, back to Doug. So, okay, so obviously when we showed our demo, we were showing ingesting data through shared links and things like that. But this question is, what about assets that don't arrive at the storage through the file fabric? How can they be incorporated into this workflow?
Yep. So, what we didn't show was that, again, we don't touch the file, everything's native. So if you have a Cloudian system and it's got, hundreds of millions of files on it, you just point us at it and then we walk it, we walk those buckets or whatever you want us to walk, and we can ingest data and metadata at thousands of files a second. Now, we don't then say, well, you have to do everything in and out of the file fabric. If you have applications like we talked about before, like David said, that natively speak S3, they don't need to talk to us. They can keep talking S3 against that bucket. And we have multiple mechanisms where we can keep up to date with that. So, obviously very expensive. We could do a full walk, but with something like Claudian, we can also tie into SQS, which is a notification. We can do it with Amazon and some of the other clouds. Each different system has different ways that we can be notified of new metadata coming in or out. And even ones that don't have something like that, we have what we call real-time mode, which is when a user goes to browse the data, we do a call out to the storage and we just verify that what they're seeing is a accurate view of the information. So no, when you talk about other gateways on the market, and again, File Fabric's not a gateway, we work with plenty of gateways, but I know that there's sometimes confusion because they proprietize data, and if you want to work with them, all your data has to be ingested through them. And so you could have a bunch of data on a NetApp, you decide that you want to go Cloudian, you put some sort of gateway like the old Avirs in front of a Cloudian, and now you got to suck all of your data in through the NetApp and change it, and then it's in a proprietary form, so you're locked in. But we don't do any of that.
And I think that one of the key, Storage Made Easy is essentially an index in place platform, and while you probably don't describe yourself as a media asset management system, the difference between Storage Made Easy and this index in place method is that it doesn't become a bottleneck to all those different kind of file ingest, S3 API ingest. It doesn't, SME doesn't become a blocker to all of that. It just indexes the metadata of all the storage volumes in place, without proprietizing it or being a kind of in-data path blocker to it.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think that just about does the questions. So I would like to thank both David and Doug for their time today, as well as you and our audience for joining us and finding out more about the media workflow in the work from home era. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can find our contact information either at the Claudian website, claudian.com, or storagemadeeasy.com. And we're more than happy to answer any additional questions that come up or you're afraid to ask. And again, be sure to check out the attachments in the bottom of this webinar that has additional information which could help answer any of those questions you may have. But that's all for today. Doug, David, thanks again.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you later.